I'm keeping myself anonymous for this one, partly out of embarrassment, and partly because attaching my name to this story seems like a genuinely bad idea. Back in 2017, a man going by the name of Jackson posted a Craigslist ad offering free housing to a woman willing to maintain his home. Essentially an auto pair arrangement minus the child care duties. I'll be upfront. At 21, I was in a pretty dark place. I had no relationship with my family. Only a small circle of people I had actually trusted. I had dropped out of college my freshman year, which my parents never forgave me for. And I was stuck working a dead-end shift at a vape shop. I like to call that stretch of my life my checkout area. When Jackson's ad popped up, something about it grabbed me. It included around 10 photos of the property. A modest, slightly dated home that I actually found charming. But the photos weren't what really reeled me in. It was the offer itself. Free rent in exchange for keeping the place tidy and no background check needed. I didn't consult anyone before applying. Like I said, I wasn't on speaking terms with my family at the time. I texted the number and he got back to me within minutes. I asked some basic questions and his answers only made me more interested. Pretty early on, he asked about my gender. When I said female, his messages seemed to get noticeably longer. I didn't read much into it. Plenty of people preferred a female housekeeper. The arrangement he described sounded like a straightforward plan. He would be gone for most of the day, but he wanted to come home to a clean house and an occasional home-cooked meal. And honestly, that sounded more fair to me. Free housing in exchange for cooking dinner? Absolutely. Anything beating clock in at the vape counter. He would even consider covering groceries. It was almost starting to sound too good to be true. He suggested I come by that same afternoon to see if it felt like a good fit. A few hours later, I pulled up in my beat-up Civic. The neighborhood was calm and unremarkable. Neighboring homes had flowers out in front, the kind of detail that signals normal people live by. Good sign, I thought. When the door opened, the man standing there wasn't what I had pictured. I imagined a generic dad type, maybe mid-40s. Instead, I was greeted by a man who looked closer to 60. Tall, gray beard, and a bit on the heavier side. He smiled warmly and went in for a hug right away, which caught me off guard, but his general friendliness put me at ease. He walked me through the house, a standard layout, downstairs with a kitchen, dining room, a living room, 4 bedrooms, and 1 bathroom upstairs. He only showed me the guest room I would be staying in and shared the bathroom. The others' doors stayed shut. He mentioned an office across the hall I was welcome to use and pointed out his room further down. A third room went unexplained. There was also a basement he described as unfinished, just used for laundry and working out. He didn't take me to the backyard that day. I told him I wanted the arrangement. He said the spot was mine. 2 days later, I moved my things in. My parents, I told them I found an apartment and left it at that. My first night there, I noticed the cameras. They weren't hidden. At least, I don't think they were meant to be. Small black units mounted in the corner of the living room and kitchen. It made logical sense. He was letting a stranger live in his home, so some security coverage was reasonable. I wish he would have mentioned them beforehand. That was the first time the situation felt even slightly off. That night in bed, the house seemed louder than it had during the tour. The old floors creaked. At one point around 1:30 a.m., I was almost sure I heard a door close somewhere downstairs. I talked myself down. Silence makes you hyper-aware of sounds you would normally tune out. In an old house are noisy by nature. The next morning, he was already gone, as promised, leaving a note listing tasks. Laundry, vacuuming, wiping down the kitchen, and standard stuff. I worked through the list, then spent some time making the guest room feel more like my own space. Unpacking clothes, setting up my laptop, placing a few items around. I actually remembered thinking it might genuinely work out. I watched YouTube, unbothered. No shouting downstairs. No one barging through my door. It was a relief. The first week passed without an incident. In the evening, we'd have light conversations, nothing deep, just surface level getting to know you talk. I cooked dinner a few nights, and he seemed to appreciate it. I started wondering if I had overreacted about the cameras. Then came the pasta night. I made chicken pasta with vegetables. I'm not a trained cook. When he got home, he looked tired. He took one bite, and his expression shifted completely. He said it was bland, and I offered to fix it or start something else, but he snapped. He told me that if I was living there for free, the bare minimum I could do was produce something edible. He shoved the plate away, stood up, and told me to clean the kitchen, and walked off to his room. It came out of nowhere. What shook me more than the words was how instantly his personality flipped. I cleaned up quietly and told myself everyone has a bad day. The next morning, I actually apologized, even thought I didn't really think I had done anything wrong. I wanted to keep things stable. He laughed it off like it was nothing, and then said something that completely changed the atmosphere. He suggested I could make it up to him by cleaning the house in my underwear. He said it with a smile. It was a harmless joke. I froze and told him I wasn't comfortable with that. He laughed again and said he was kidding, told me to relax, and he left. I stood there after he walked away, feeling genuinely unsettled for the first time. That was the moment I started questioning whether something was fundamentally wrong with him, not just moodiness. I texted one of my closest friends and told her everything. She told me I was out of my mind for staying and to get out immediately, but I didn't want to leave. As strange as things were, I still felt more in control of my life than I had ever had at home. Going back felt like admitting defeat. The following Monday, I was out getting groceries with the money he had left me when a car started laying on the horn behind me. I thought I had done something wrong on the road, but he kept following me. I pulled over. A girl got out, around my age, and walked up to my window. She asked if I was living in that house. When I said yes, she told me to get away from that man. Apparently, Jackson wasn't even his real name. She had had the same arrangement before me. She said he eventually realized he knew things he shouldn't have known. Things you've never told him. She figured out he was watching her through the cameras constantly. When she tried to leave, he made it difficult, peppering her with questions about her whereabouts. And then she told me that the part that made my stomach drop. One night, she woke up and found him walking out of her bedroom. Then she told me the worst part. He didn't have a job. He had been lying about going to. He was inside the house most days. Every strange thing suddenly snapped into focus. I asked her how to leave without triggering a reaction. She told me to act completely normal, to gradually move my important belongings out in small amounts so he wouldn't notice. And when the time came, to make it look like I was running a regular errand. Don't confront him. After she drove away, I sat in my car for a few minutes to try and collect my thoughts before going back inside. Walking through that front door, everything felt different. The air itself felt watched. That night, I searched the room the way she described. Within a few minutes, I found it. On the top shelf of the clothes, tucked into a far corner behind a box, a tiny black lens peering out through a small drilled hole. I put the box back slowly, like I hadn't seen a thing. I didn't sleep at all that night. Somewhere in the early hours of the morning, I heard my door slowly creak open. I turned over and looked. It was Jackson. He saw me, apologized for waking me, and pulled the door shut. I needed to leave. Starting the next morning, I began quietly moving one small bag of belongings to my car each day. Nothing suspicious, nothing that would raise red flags. 3 days later, I drove away while he was supposedly at work. Though, after everything I've learned, who knows where he actually was? And I never went back. He texted me asking, where was I? I told him I decided to move back home and thanked him for the opportunity. He kept texting, asking why, to come back, to talk in person. I never replied again. About a week later, I got a notification from someone that had attempted to log into one of my old accounts. The login attempt was traced to the same town as his house. I changed every password after that. I'll never know exactly what his intentions were, and honestly, I don't want to. Nothing actually happened to me, but I genuinely believe that if I would have stayed, something eventually would have. If you ever see a listing like that, free housing from a stranger online, Just remember, nothing like that ever comes without a cost. My girlfriend ended things and asked me to leave with almost no warning. I wasn't on the street, thankfully. A friend let me crash at his place while I searched for my own apartment. It's strange to think that 2008 was nearly 20 years ago. For anyone who wasn't around for it, the early 2000 internet was a different world entirely. I was in my early 20s, reckless and almost aggressively overconfident. The idea that something bad could happen to me simply never registered. That changed one spring evening when I learned firsthand that genuinely bad people exist in ordinary places. Facebook was just starting to take off, but most people I knew were still on MySpace. Social media existed, but nothing like today's scale. We have all heard cautionary tales about the internet and brushed them off. The platform everyone seemed to use for everything back then was Craigslist. And I mean everything. Before a marketplace existed, Craigslist was the place to buy, sell, find work, locate housing. My friends swore by it. I would never have much interest until my life came apart a bit in the spring of 2008. But finding something affordable on $7 an hour proved harder than I would ever expect. That same friend who loved Craigslist suggested I check it out for rooms or rental listings. Somehow that felt like a step too far for me. I had some vague uneasiness about it, and I can't fully explain. What I was willing to use it for, though, was furniture. She would kept everything after the breakup, and all I needed to eventually fill a place. At first, it felt like stumbling onto a buried treasure. Deals everywhere. My friend had a large garage where I stashed my finds until I had somewhere to put them. One afternoon, I was hunting for a love seat or a compact sofa and found a post from a guy named Keith, an entire sectional for $45. The photo showed it in good condition, reasonably sized. The price should have raised a red flag. Instead, I saw it as a nice couch at a low number and reached out. Keith replied almost instantly. He explained he landed a new job out of state and was trying to clear things out quickly, hence the price. That made enough sense to me. We swapped numbers and set a time to meet that evening, a meetup that would leave a mark on me for years. I arrived around 9 p.m. in a retrospect. Obviously, no ideal, but it didn't register as strange at the time. He had said his work schedule pushed things late. The street was dark in a way that went beyond just the hour. Run down, almost no streetlight. Every house on the block looking as desolate as the next. I tried calling the number he'd given me, out of service. Just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Different area code. I picked up. The voice on the other hand was friendly but unsettling, deep, and oddly erratic. He called me Viva, apologized about the phone situation, said he had broken his and was using a work phone device. I was more annoyed than alarmed. Hindsight is one thing, but in that moment your brain narrows in on the task at hand. I was thinking about the couch. He told me to come around to the back of the house. He would let me in and through the back door. I didn't question it. I made my way around and stood at the door, waiting, unsure whether to just walk in or hold it for him to come out. I decided to call him again. Instead of hearing the ring in my ear, a ringtone sounded from the bushes in the backyard. That was the first moment I genuinely felt something was wrong. Keith came stumbling out of the bushes, waving his flip phone, explaining he had been out back getting rid of old food that he liked to feed the wildlife in the yard. He said he hadn't meant to startle me. I told him I just wanted to see the couch and be on my way. He cheerfully agreed. At the back door, he struggled to get it open, which itself was strange since I assumed he would be unlocking it from inside. In the dim light, I got the first real look at him. Late 50s, extremely thin, long white hair, and a greasy ponytail, and the smell stale cigarettes overwhelming. He asked if I could help him force the door, said it gets stuck sometimes, and told me to use my shoulder. By that point, something in me knew, but I was already deep in the moment and kept moving forward. I gripped the handle and lowered my shoulder and pushed. The door swung open from the other side. I had too much momentum to hit the floor hard. From the dark room, I heard Keith shout one word: now. Two men came from either side, pinned me down, and I struggled, but one of them was enormous. Keith began kicking me in the face. The darkness made it worse. I couldn't see anything. I only felt the impact. One of them called for the tape, and I heard it being pulled from a roll. Then something happened that I can only describe as a miracle. During the chaos of falling and being held down, my phone had accidentally called my friend, the one I had been staying with. His voice came through the speaker loud and clear, asking hello. I yelled out that I was behind the house and needed help. A bluff. I was alone, but I was praying they didn't know that. The large man's grip loosened. He glanced at Keith, who had paused for a second. That second was enough. I broke free and ran. I could hear them behind me, but I didn't look back. I got to my car, locked the door, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I caught a clear look at the large man for the first time. Bald, patchy beard, eyes that looked completely empty. He was grabbing at my door handles as I drove away. I didn't stop driving for hours. I was terrified they might follow me back to my friend's place. Eventually, I called him back and told him everything. We contacted authorities, but by then, it was too late. The post had been deleted and the phone traced back to the prepaid burner that had already been ditched. I gave the best description I could. As far as I know, Keith and the others were never found. What still disturbs me the most isn't the attack itself, it's thinking about what they actually wanted. This wasn't a robbery. Nobody lures someone with a $45 couch just to steal it from them. Whatever they had planned, it was something far worse. Something sinister. I've gone down mental rabbit holes more times than I can count, thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't accidentally made that call. I made a lot of bad calls that night. I'm just grateful I'm still here to admit to it. I hired her sometime in early fall of last year. I work long days and live alone in a 2-story house. Modest in size, but still more space than one person really needs. Housework kept slipping through the cracks. No matter how many times I told myself I would get to it. One evening, I was browsing Craigslist and stumbled across a simple listing. Independent cleaner, cash only, flexible schedule. I figured it was worth a shot. I emailed the number and she replied the following morning. She typically worked apartments, but said houses were fine. We agreed on a day she could come while I was at work. She asked a few reasonable questions. Square footage, pets. I told her no pets. Relatively a small place, and that I lived alone. Looking back, I mentioned that last part way too casually. Came on a Thursday. I met her before heading to work. She appeared to be around 38, quiet, didn't make much eye contact. I assumed she was just shy. I walked her through the rooms I needed clean and showed her where the supplies were. Before I left, she asked what time I usually got home. I told her around 6, sometimes closer to 7, depending on traffic. At the time, it seemed like a normal question. She probably just didn't want to still be there when I returned. When I got home that evening, the place looked genuinely great. Floors shining, counters spotless, that fresh cleaning product smelled throughout. I paid her what we agreed, and she left. Nothing felt wrong. About a week, everything was fine. Then roughly 6 nights later, I woke up somewhere around 2 or 3 a.m. Not usual for me. I'm a light sleeper. What was unusual was a soft thump from downstairs. Could have been the house settling. I ignored it. A couple nights after that, it sounded like the cabinet door closing. I told myself I was half asleep and imagining things. Over the following week, a small thing started to feel slightly off. Nothing alarming on its own, but accumulating. A kitchen cabinet left open a few inches. A dining chair pulled slightly away from the table. The hand towel in the downstairs bathroom feeling faintly damped. Each thing was unexplainable. Together, they were starting to bother me. The nighttime sounds continued. What sounds like a single slow footstep. I convinced myself it was the floorboards contracting. I started sleeping with my bedroom door fully closed instead of cracked like usual. I didn't want to admit I was genuinely getting uneasy, but I was. One night I woke up almost certain I heard movement directly outside my bedroom door. The kind of sound that comes from weighing shift on old flooring. I laid there, staring at the door handle, waiting for it to turn. Nothing happened. Eventually, I fell back to sleep. In the morning, I felt embarrassment for being scared. I checked the whole house. Everything looked fine. Around that time, food started disappearing faster than it should. A yogurt cup I was almost certain was in the fridge the night before. Gone. Bread slices coming up shorter than I remembered. I was trying to explain it away, but then one morning I found a glass sitting in the sink that I was absolutely sure I had not used. I lived alone. I started Googling sleepwalking. The night that changed everything. I woke up and heard footsteps downstairs. Not house noises. Footsteps. I grabbed my phone and listened. After maybe 10 seconds, something slightly bumped the wall. I didn't go downstairs. Fear has a way of rooting you to the spot instead of pushing you to act. I sat up in bed for half an hour, heard nothing more, and eventually talked myself back down. I looked like a coward in my own mind. The next morning I checked every door and window, all locked. Even went downstairs to the basement. Nothing. A few days later I opened my kitchen, and inside a small ring where I kept 2 spare house keys, only one remained. I got a weird feeling, thinking through the obvious explanation. I searched everywhere. The key was gone. The cleaner had been alone in my house for several hours across 2 visits. I started locking my bedroom door at night. About 4 nights after that, I decided to run a test. I left for work as normal, drove a few blocks, and then circled back and parked on the adjustment street. I slipped in through the back door and went upstairs to wait. Around 11 a.m., I heard it, my front door unlocking. I heard footsteps entering. I positioned myself where I could partially see the downstairs through the stair railing. It looked like her, the cleaner. She walked in with complete ease, as though she owned the place. No cleaning supplies. She opened my fridge, took out a drink, sat down at my kitchen table, sat there quietly for a few minutes. Then she got up and began slowly moving through the living room, examining things. She picked up a framed photo of me and my brother and stared at it, and then she moved towards the stairs. I backed into my room quietly as I could and eased the door shut. I had no idea what to do. After about a minute, I heard footsteps on the stairs and then stopped. Her shadow appeared under my door. She stood there, not moving, as if she already knew someone was on the other side. I decided it was now or never, and I threw the door open. She was already standing just a foot away, eyes already on the door, now on me, but standing there in better light. I immediately realized this wasn't the same woman. Similar in some ways, but different build, different face, different hair. Her expression, blank, cold, almost hostile, was unlike anything I had ever seen. We stood there in total silence for a few long seconds before we slowly turned and walked back down the stairs. I heard the front door open and close. My heart was hammering. I was shaken, too hard to speak or move. I waited nearly 15 minutes before I called 911. The police came and I told them everything. I gave them her contact information, phone number, email, the original cleaner. Went completely silent after that day. I had every lock in the house replaced the same afternoon. Went straight to the hardware store the moment the officer left. What still sits with me is something one of the officers said when he asked whether I had given anyone else a key. When I told him no, he said, "People like that don't always work alone." I never hired another cleaner.